The views and opinions of the following show do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of News Talk 1450 WOL, Radio 1 Incorporated, or their management. This show has been previously recorded. No phone calls, please.
This is Montgomery Mosaic on 1450 WOL, WPRS, HD2, and worldwide on WOLDCnews.com. Montgomery Mosaic features topics of interest to Montgomery County residents, businesses, and visitors. Here now, come. Montgomery Mosaic features topics of interest to Montgomery County residents, businesses, and visitors. Here now is your host, Deborah Milo.
Good morning, County friends, and welcome to the November edition of Montgomery Mosaic. I'm your host, Deborah Milo. I hope you're having a wonderful day and staying safe out there on the roads. It's a little drizzly and rainy, but you know what? We've got to keep it safe. You know, with less daylight and darker commuting hours, pedestrian and driving safety is paramount. And here to talk about that today is Jeff Dunkel, Pedestrian Safety Coordinator for the Montgomery County Department of Transportation. Hi, Jeff. It's great to see you again.
Hello, Deborah. Great to be here. Thanks for this opportunity.
No, we thank you for coming on today's show. You know, I was kind of hoping that today was going to be one of those beautiful, crisp fall days that we always read about, but instead we get the rain. And, of course, with the rain comes dangerous times of the year as far as pedestrian and cyclist collisions with vehicles. Talk a little bit about what the Street Smart campaign is doing to address this very, very significant problem.
Well, as we've talked about before, Deborah, the Street Smart campaign is a regional campaign for both suburban Maryland, D.C., as well as Northern Virginia. And we work together as a group to try to raise awareness on bicycle and pedestrian safety. And this is so important at this time of the year because this is the most dangerous time of the year for bicyclists and pedestrians. Visibility is reduced as the dark hours of darkness increase. And so we have really increased our efforts this fall to try to raise that awareness for people. It's an education and an enforcement group of actions that we put in place for about 6 to 8 weeks. And essentially what we do is we try to raise awareness with people about how important it is to be aware at this time of the year and to practice safe pedestrian and bicycle practices when walking or biking, and also for drivers. It's very important for drivers to be aware because we know the drivers about 60% of the time are at fault in pedestrian collisions.
That's true.
Drivers don't always know that. You know, drivers think it's always the pedestrian's fault, but in fact, we know that actually the drivers are the ones that need to be aware. They need to slow down and they need to yield to pedestrians.
And you know, speaking of that, we just moved the clocks back about an hour, giving us less daylight hours, especially during the evening commute. So talk a little bit more about how much this does factor into the pedestrian and cyclist accidents.
Well, we do a lot of analysis of our crash reports, and we have determined that most of our collisions are occurring at this time of the year, October, November, and December. And we were able to draw a direct correlation with the hours of darkness. As the hours of darkness increase, the pedestrian collisions increase as well. And in fact, we know from national statistics that 72% of all traffic or pedestrian fatalities are occurring in darkened conditions.
72%?
72%. Ooh. So that means when it's dark outside, it is a much more dangerous time to be walking about. Absolutely.
So has police enforcement stepped up to address the problem?
They have. And in fact, we've just begun a whole series of enforcement actions these last 2 weeks, and that will be going on well into the period over the next month. And we have been doing what we call crosswalk stings, where we have police as decoys walking in the crosswalks, and if the driver does not stop for that person or that decoy, then they will be pulled over and issued a citation.
Okay.
We are quite proud of our Montgomery County Police Force. A week ago, we actually did a sting operation for distraction of people on cell phones when they were driving.
Oh, yeah.
We had a police officer who was, as a decoy, he looked like a homeless person with a big sign saying, "I am not a homeless person. I'm a Montgomery County police officer, and I am enforcing traffic safety laws."
He had a sign. He was actually carrying the sign.
He did. And he was standing in the median. He was standing in the median, dressed like a homeless person, and with this big cardboard sign, you know, like we sometimes see with homeless folks. And woe to the person who did not read that sign. And he had a little microphone on it, and he would call in license plates of people he observed who were texting or on their cell phones while they were driving. Now, I will tell you that we got some people were unhappy about
I'm
that.
sure they were.
But then equal number of people were contrite about the fact that they had been basically doing what we know is a very dangerous practice, to be on your cell phone and to be, trying to text when you're driving and moving at maybe 30 or 40 miles an hour. And we know this is a result of increased collisions. And so it's so important to put your cell phone away. When you're in the car, put that cell phone in the glove box and wait until you get to your destination and take it out.
Or either that or just pull over to a parking lot if you need to make that call and just do what you need to do and then get back on the road.
Absolutely.
And be very careful about when you get back on that road.
Yeah, people's lives are in the balance on this. I mean, we have people who we think are being killed because of these distracted driving incidents. Now, I also want to point out that this is not limited to drivers. We know that distracted walking is a factor,
That
too.
was my next question.
Yeah, so Deborah, if you go to any, like here in Bethesda and Silver Spring, our urban centers here in Montgomery County, at lunchtime, you look around and everybody's on their cell phone, their iPhones, earbuds in, their eyes looking down, and they're crossing the street perhaps without even noticing cars. And we have done some data analysis in Montgomery County. In these last couple of years, we found a spike in teenagers and 20-somethings who are being at fault, pedestrians at fault. And we believe that a lot of it has to do with people. That's the group that's using those cell phones and those iPhones. And so anyway, we are trying to target that group now in some of our education efforts to teach people, you text, you're next, you may be hit. We have the Street Smart campaign. The most visible aspect of that is the Tired Faces campaign that you see.
I've seen that campaign, yes.
Yes, and this is actually the third year of using this imagery, and the reason is because it's been proven to be hugely effective.
Absolutely.
The recognition on that in Montgomery County is over 75% at this point. People know the messaging, and so we're really encouraged to be using that. And we've expanded that to include this message of distracted walking being so dangerous. You text, you're next. Or we have a boy with earbuds in his ears, and it says smartphones can make you do stupid things.
Smartphones are not always so smart, nor is the way we use them. Good morning, listeners. This is Deborah Milo with Montgomery Mosaic on 1450 WOL. And today I'm talking about the importance of pedestrian safety with Jeff Donkel. Jeff is the pedestrian safety coordinator for the county's Department of Transportation. We were just kind of talking a little bit about the campaign where you see the tire marks on the faces of individuals, of pedestrians. Jeff, tell our listeners what words of advice you'd give to all three groups, the drivers, the pedestrians, and the cyclists, because I got to tell you, I have been one of all three. And, we do have to be very cognizant about where we are, what we're doing. We have to be engaged in the moment. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, you raised a very good point, Deborah, is that we are all drivers, pedestrians, and often a lot of us are also bicyclists at various times.
Oh, yeah.
But the reality is that we share the roads, and we need to basically be looking out for each other. And that's why in our messaging we try to get across that drivers need to slow down. They need to obey speed limits, and they need to be watching out for people in the street who are walking and biking. And you need to stop for the pedestrians in the crosswalks. When people are in the crosswalk, establishing the crosswalk, it's a law in Maryland that you are required to stop. And if you don't stop, you'll be getting a ticket, and you'll be getting points, which will be continually costing you your insurance company.
That's right.
Also, we really encourage the drivers to be, look twice. Don't just look and think you didn't see anything. Go look again and make sure that if you're turning and turning movements. This is where we see a lot of collisions happening, especially in our more urban environments. Pedestrians, when they're crossing with a light in the crosswalk, a lot of times the drivers are not paying close attention, and they'll make a right turn or a left turn, and that's where some of our more serious collisions also occur. So
I've actually seen that.
So we're asking our drivers to be sure to yield to the pedestrians when they're in those crosswalks, and when they're crossing with the lights, they have the right of way. You don't, and so you need to basically stop and let the pedestrians pass. Also, it's very important for people to understand that bicyclists need to be given space on the road.
Yes.
There is actually a state law that motorists are to provide a 3 foot of clearance on a roadway when passing a bicyclist, and that's not everybody knows that, and so we are going to to be increasing our enforcement actions on that as well, so that if you don't provide that 3-foot clearance, you may be subject to a citation by the police. It's very important to provide that because the cyclists need a little bit of margin for error. As they're going down the road, and they're very vulnerable. I mean, there's no, as we like to say, they don't come with bumpers.
No, they don't.
So if you bump a bicyclist, they could become a fatal collision.
Absolutely. It's different when you are on a bicycle and you're in a car. Recently we were out just driving through the countryside, and they have a lot of different communities have different events, and so we were going downhill. And we ran into this, I want to say like a flock of geese, but a flock of cyclists. And they had their children with them. And that you have to give them room to be able to bike.
And that is occurring more and more often, Deborah, as bicycling is becoming more popular, and we're seeing more bicyclists on the roads.
Yeah.
And a very important point to make here is that the bicyclists do have the right to that lane. A lot of times drivers don't understand that. They're like, get that guy out of my way. He's going 15 miles an hour, and I want to drive 30.
They're on a bike.
They're on a bike, exactly. Or they might be going uphill, which is, it's hard to go as fast in that setting. So,
depending on how old you are, too. But
Right. But it is state law that they do have the right to use the full lane. In fact, you're seeing signage going up to that effect. So, and part of that reason is because it increases the visibility of the cyclists, which is when you don't see them or don't notice them, or when something happens that's not predictable, that's when these collisions happen, and sometimes with very tragic results. Deborah, can I point out also that it's important not just for drivers to be looking out for the pedestrians, but the pedestrians need to look out for themselves. Because even though they may be in the right sometimes, and we find that they're less often at fault in these collisions than drivers, the reality is they pay the biggest price. They're the ones who are injured. And so as a result of that, it's ever more important that the pedestrians be more defensive in how they walk and get about. And so therefore, we're telling folks to try to cross at the crosswalks and wait for the walk signals at the signals. When you walk against that walk signal, you are out there when the driver doesn't expect to see you there, and that's when you get hit. And in fact, you're jaywalking at that point, and you're subject to a fine as well. And it's important that you look out for the turning cars. You may have the right to be in that crosswalk when the light changes, but that car that's making that turn, it doesn't notice you, is the one that's going to roll over you and really hurt you. So be sure to be looking. We say look left, right, and left again, and look over your shoulder, because sometimes these cars can be coming from behind you when they're making a turn.
That's smart.
We also want to say that it's important, very helpful, to make eye contact. And eye contact can't be relied upon to absolutely sure that you're safe, but when you do have that eye contact with the driver, you're both more aware of each other being there, and therefore you're less likely to do something that's going to result in being hit. So we call it situational awareness. When you're doing that, you're certainly not looking down at your cell phone, or texting a message to your friend. You're actually looking at what could be the dangerous situation with the driver. So we encourage people to try to establish eye contact with drivers when they're crossing. And of course, the most important thing, not the most important thing, but one of the most important things this time of year is this issue of being visible.
Oh, yeah.
I can't tell you how hard it is to see a pedestrian in darkened conditions, especially rainy conditions like we had today.
Yes.
The fact is that drivers just can't see you. So, and this time of year, why is it that in the dark time of year when you are most at risk, everybody goes to dark color clothing? This is when you need to be wearing the day glow colors.
The bright orange and the neon green.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we encourage people to wear at least light color or bright color clothing, but maybe even better, something reflective. We have a link on our website which gives them a location where people can buy materials, and that website is Montgomery County, montgomerycountymd.gov/walk. And on that location, we actually have a website we just put up where people can get reflective materials to help them be visible out there at night.
You're listening to Montgomery Mosaic on 1450 WOL with your host, Deborah Milo. We'll be back in just a moment.
Good morning. This WOL traffic update is brought to you by GEHA. Inner loop at the Beltway once again today. It's going to be slow as you head from 95 in College Park over to Kenilworth Avenue 201, where just before that the right lane is closed. With that work zone we've become familiar with now over the last couple of weeks, and it is still very slow leaving College Park to head toward Greenbelt and Landover on the inner loop. GEHA helps you live more and worry less with more than 1 million providers nationwide and vision for no additional premium. Let life happen. Learn more at GEHA.com. Now your WOL weather forecast brought to you by Subway. For today, sunny, a high near 64, increasing clouds overnight down to 46. Tomorrow, morning showers, partly cloudy in the afternoon, a high near 64 again. Try a new Reuben sandwich from Subway restaurants, corned beef or turkey breast, melted Swiss cheese, sauerkraut, and Thousand Island dressing on freshly baked bread. Subway, eat fresh, limited time only, participating restaurants. Steve Hirschhorn for News Talk 1450 WOL, where information is power.
Listeners, welcome back to Montgomery Mosaic. This is your host, Deborah Milo. Today, we're talking about the Alert Montgomery system with Chuck Chrysostomo with the county's Office of Emergency Services and Homeland Security. And Chuck, before we took a quick break, we were talking a little bit about what would happen from someone if they want to get an alert from a jurisdiction other than Montgomery County. In other words, how they go about doing that. For those that didn't get a chance to hear that, could you mind going back over that again, please?
Sure. Again, there are 18 jurisdictions in the National Capital Region. In Montgomery County, we have 4 of those systems. The Montgomery County alert system, called Alert Montgomery, but then the cities of Gaithersburg, Rockville, and Tacoma Park all have their own separate systems as well. And so to receive those, you would have to go to those separate. Rockville and Tacoma Park all have their own separate systems as well. And so to receive those, you would have to go to those separate systems to sign up to receive their individual alerts. If you go into their systems, the one thing that you can select to receive from each of their individual systems and from Montgomery County is the traffic alerts.
Okay.
We've intertwined our system in the structure of how we created it so that we can, if there is a major roadway incident that is a prolonged outage on a major state road or major interstate, we will send those alerts, and we will send them into the Gaithersburg, Rockville, and Tacoma Park systems as well. Because we're all intertwined with the roadways in Montgomery County, we decided as a jurisdiction to intertwine our systems. We're the only ones in the National Capital Region that are doing this, by the way. But we worked so closely together that we thought that this was a very good idea. But to get the individual emergency alerts from those specific systems, you would have to sign on separately with them.
Which makes sense, actually. Would you mind, Chuck, giving the website again for citizens to be able to access to get Alert Montgomery?
Sure. For Alert Montgomery, you can either Google Alert Montgomery or simply type in alert.montgomery at montgomerycountymd.gov, and it'll take you straight to a sign-up page. You enter in a username and a password that is specific for you, and then an address. And these are addresses of concern, so if you wanted to receive alerts about situations near your home, you could put that in. If you had kids in school, you could put that address. If you wanted to put an address in other than your home, you could put a fire station nearby or a community center nearby.
Very nice. You're listening to Montgomery Mosaic with your host, Deborah Milo, talking today with Chuck Chrysostomo with the Office of Emergency Services and Homeland Security for Montgomery County. You know, Chuck, I would think that people really benefit from Alert Montgomery when there's a heavy snow. Now, you know, the past couple of years, we've had some pretty heavy snowstorms. What kinds of information does Alert Montgomery provide during the snow emergencies?
Well, snow emergencies generally don't sneak up on you, so it's one of the ones we can get some prediction on 24 hours out. So we will send usually a watch that'll come out. So the National Weather Service will issue that as a watch, meaning a storm has a potential to hit the area. As the time approaches for the actual storm, then a warning will go out, a winter storm warning. And that typically will have more specific information about at least what the predicted snowfall will be, and so folks can get an idea of how to plan their days.
Right.
But that predicted snowfall is not always exactly accurate, I will tell you. And so in this past winter, for instance, we had one winter storm warning that came out that was talking about an 8-inch snowfall, and we ended up getting 23 inches up in Damascus.
Yes.
And
I remember.
So, you know, it's still a little bit of an art and a science in the weather predictions game, but we take the information directly from the National Weather Service, and we will convey that out via the alert system to get folks up. And then Also, if it's a prolonged situation, give them information about what they can do within their homes to stay safe, particularly if the power goes out. During the derecho event in 2012,
right,
we had a prolonged outage for 7 days in some people's cases.
That's right.
And so what do people do with the food in their refrigerator, for instance?
Right.
So we had the health department craft up some do's and don'ts about what to do with the food. We had a lot of folks with debris in their yards and in the along the street. So we sent out messaging again about what to do, what the pickup times were, that the county was going to come along and pick up that debris, on how people should package it before we come on pickup day. And so that was very helpful. We really did come out of that. That was one of the bigger events we've had in recent past. So we will give additional information if we had a major gas leak.
Right.
We would be evacuating an area. We would send the notification only to those residents in the area of concern.
Right.
And then we would give them, again, some do's and don'ts about where to go, and when to return back when it was safe.
I was just about to ask you about the preparedness information and what kinds of tips that you would offer, so that's good to know. That's very good to know. This is Deborah Milo of Montgomery Mosaic, and I'm talking today with Chuck Christosimo with the Office of Emergency Services and Homeland Security for the county. And we were just talking about some of the types of preparedness information that the emergency management services can offer along with the Alert Montgomery alerts. What about pets, Chuck? You know, people love their animals and they want to protect them just like the rest of the family. What kind of tips do you offer about protecting pets in an emergency situation?
We have a lot of information that we've developed over the last couple of years for preparedness for lots of different groups of folks in Montgomery County.
Mm-hmm.
From the general family, general residents of Montgomery County, we've got a series of pamphlets that have all the preparedness information. What kinds of things you need to do in your home to be prepared.
Mm-hmm.
We have a series that was created for senior citizens, and what kinds of things that they need to do, because their situations might be slightly different,
right,
in that they have lots of medications that they need to have, and you need to have a good supply of those. If we have a major emergency that runs for 7 days and lots of things are closed, including pharmacies, you will not be able to renew a prescription, for instance.
That's
so
right.
We have some tips in there about that. We absolutely have a pamphlet that's created for pets, because in an emergency we found that people will not leave their homes if a call for an evacuation comes out unless they bring their pet with them. It has been in the past that we've set up shelters which did not accept pets.
Oh, I
and so
see.
what people will do is they'll stay in their home and remain in danger. So what we've done is two things. One, created information about what to do and how to be prepared with your pet as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we've now created a separate volunteer group to set up a pet shelter. In the event that people need to have shelter, we will create a separate adjacent shelter facility for pets.
Right.
And then the humans go on another side of the shelter. We cannot intermix the two simply because pets are not always compatible with strangers.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Not only that, but they also may not be compatible with other, with people who have allergies. I mean, there's just so many factors to consider about this.
Absolutely.
And I guess you actually need to update the information you provide depending upon what happens. Do you remember when we actually had when we had the earthquake in Montgomery County, even though the epicenter was in Virginia? Do you remember that?
Oh, absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Well, the East Coast is generally not an area that you
Right.
experience
Right.
earthquakes. But as soon as that rumbling started, I used to live in an area that was subject to a lot of earthquakes. And
So did I.
When I heard that train coming, I knew what was going to. I was hoping that nothing bigger would follow. And after 12 seconds, it essentially was over in our area. But that earthquake shuddered all the way up through New York. And so it did, fairly little damage in this area, although some structures such as the National Cathedral were and the Washington Monument were severely damaged. But generally, for the most part, we didn't see a tremendous amount of damage. But following that, we had a lot of tips that we sent out through our alert system about what people should check for, because after an earthquake, the two big issues in buildings and structures is gas and electricity.
That makes sense.
Right. If there's major damage in a facility, you want to be aware of those two things. You don't want to be striking matches. You don't want to be turning on and off light switches, for instance. But the biggest thing about earthquakes and the precaution for earthquakes is you don't want to be running out of the building when the earthquake happens. Many people in Montgomery County, including many Montgomery County employees,
unfortunately,
were running out of buildings. And why you don't want to do that is, number one, the building code for buildings in the United States are sufficient to be able to keep those buildings intact.
Right.
You look at earthquakes that happen in other foreign countries, their building codes are much different. And building collapses are very often seen in those areas. They're not seen with, in the United States. So staying in the building is the safest place you can be, and under a sturdy table is what we recommend. So you tuck, drop, and you get underneath something very sturdy. When the shaking stops, then you make an assessment whether you need to leave that facility or not. And so those are the precautions that we generally send out in our preparedness information about earthquakes.
You're listening to Montgomery Mosaic with host Deborah Milo, and I'm talking to Chuck Chrysostomo with the county's Office of Emergency Services and Homeland Security. Chuck, one more time, would you mind giving the website again? I just want to make sure our citizens have access to the information that they need.
The website for our agency is where a lot of this information is contained, preparedness information. So you can go to the Montgomery County website at www.montgomerycountymd.gov. If you want to go specifically to our site, it's that same URL /OEMHS. And it'll take you straight to our website. All this pamphlet and preparedness information is accessible on that site.
Chuck, can you talk a little more about the earthquake in 2011?
Well, again, the frequency of earthquakes is something that's probably not what we need to prepare for the most. What we get in this region is severe thunderstorms, really. The frequency of severe thunderstorms, we get snow every year, and we get, as we did this past spring, all the way into March.
Oh, my.
The months of February and March are really when we get the most snow, not the months of December and January. And so we ask people to be prepared. And what does being prepared mean?
Right.
It means being able to sustain yourself and your family for 72 hours. And that's 3 days. Not being able to get a response on a call for police or fire in an emergency, unless it's a severe emergency, because in the 2010 blizzard, for instance, it took 4 hours for ambulance services to be able to plow through to get to the most severe cases that were called in. They could not get to the others.
And like
they
you said,
triaged the others out. So you need to be prepared with medications. If you have medical conditions, you need to have food supplies that are able to be, hold you for a period of time. If you don't have flashlights and batteries, you probably should stock up on those. The preparedness information that we have on the pamphlets on our website give you those basics of what you need to have in your homes. There are lots of facilities in lots of areas that are prone to storms, generators, backup generators.
That's a good point.
In Montgomery County, it is not something that you see widespread. I am from a small island in the Pacific where typhoons devastated that area, and so about every third family has their own little personal generator.
I understand.
But here we don't probably have that need. What we have set up in the county are for our shelters, those places where we would set up as shelters for folks who have damaged homes or need shelter to have backup generators. So we're building these new recreation facilities that now have backup generator systems built into them. All of our fire stations now have backup generators, and our public safety headquarters, which houses police fire administration, now has a huge backup generator system. So more and more we're developing that capability. But individual homes, it's still really kind of an individual choice for people to make. Being without power for 7 days, as we were in Hurricane Isabel in 2003 and the derecho in 2012, can be a little strenuous, to say the least. So
you're right about that. Chuck, can you talk a little more about winter preparation? You know, we're coming up on that time again, and we need some advice and some tips about how to prepare for the winter.
Sure. Winter preparation really is about getting homes prepared to accept winter. One of the first things you need to do after fall leaves drop is clear those gutters so that you don't get ice damming occurring on the roofs of your homes. That's a very important preventive measure. But also then making sure that you're out there clearing those sidewalks. It is a really important measure that assists us so much with the county as we do our road clearing efforts, so that people can move around the roadways and pedestrians can move about the sidewalks, particularly in front of businesses, because that's where the major foot traffic is.
And that's something we need to remember, especially about the sidewalks, because I've been in a situation where I've had to wait for the snow to clear. It's not fun, needless to say. Well, Chuck, thank you again for coming out and talking to us today. All of these are such important tips that we need to remember. And the website again, Chuck?
Is www.montgomerycountymd.gov/OEMHS.
And listeners, thank you for sharing part of your day with us. We'll see you next time, and remember, we're on twice a month now, the second and the fourth Wednesday each month at the same time. We'll see you next time on Montgomery Mosaic on 1450 WOL, WPRS HD2, and worldwide on WOLDCnews.com. Till next time, make it a great and safe day.